Fifth grade Excel, lesson 106, selecting the fraction that best represents a shaded region. Which fraction in the set best represents the shaded portion? You're going to look at this picture, and the first thing you want to decide is the shaded part larger or smaller than a half. So it's a good idea just to draw a line right down the middle and decide, is this smaller than a half or is it larger than a half? Now in this case it looks like it's pretty much a half. And then you're going to go through the fractions and figure out which fractions are, in this case, a half, or if the portion is larger than a half, you're going to decide which fractions are equal to a fraction that's larger than 1/2. If the portion that's shaded is smaller than a half, you've got to decide which of the fractions are smaller than a half. And then you can narrow it down from there and pick the correct answer. So again, this one looks like it's a half. 1/5 is smaller than a half. 5/6 is greater than a half because 3/6 would be a half. 7/8 is greater than a half because 4/8 would be a half. Here's a half, and then 1/4 is smaller than a half because 2/4 is equal to a half. Both 1/5 and 1/4 are too small. 5/6 and 7/8 are too large. So 1/2 is the only choice, the only good choice there. All right, let's take a look at number 1. First of all, look at the shaded part. Does that look like it's larger or smaller than a half that's shaded to you? You should be thinking or saying that that's smaller than a half. Now let's go through and pick all the ones that are larger than a half and get rid of those. 5/6, is that smaller or larger than a half? Well, it's larger because 3/6 is a half, so we know it can't be that one. How about 1/3? No, 1/3 is less than a half because 1/2, 1/3, that's getting a little bit smaller. What about 3/4? Well, that's larger than a half because 2/4 is a half, and so that's going to be too big to represent this. 8/9, that's larger than a half. That's almost the whole thing. Only one more ninth to go, and you've got the whole box shaded. So the only one that makes any sense is 1/3. Again, let's look at the shaded portion on this one. We're doing this together, by the way. You should have already marked this on your paper over here. This is definitely larger than a half. Let's draw a line on here. I think a half would be somewhere right about in there, right? So this is going to be a little bit bigger than a half. It's not going to be a lot bigger, but a little bit bigger than 1/2. So let's get rid of all the fractions that are equal to less than a half. How about 2/9? Is that less than a half? Sure is. How about 1/5? That's hardly anything. Is 5/7 less than a half? No, that's going to be larger than a half. Half of 7 is 3.5. 5 is bigger than 3.5, so it's past the halfway point of 7. 3.5 is the halfway point of 7. This is larger than that. And if you don't understand what I just said, you can always compare 5/7 to a half by doing this, what we learned how to do yesterday. 7 times 1 is 7, 2 times 5 is 10, and you can see that 5/7 is larger than 1/2 because 10 is larger than 7. So this could be it, but let's come back to that one. How about 1/8? Is 1/8 larger than a half? Well, no, because 4/8 would be a half. So the only logical answer is 5/7. All right, I want you to go ahead and pause the video, do numbers 3 through 8, turn it back on when you're ready to see the solutions. Here we go. We're going to work through these pretty quickly. This is obviously smaller than a half. That's exactly a half. That's larger than a half. That's exactly a half. This is the only one that's smaller than a half that makes sense. And you can divide it into fourths and see that that's about 1/4 right there. Number 4, this piece is pretty small. It's smaller than a half. And this here is larger than a half. That's larger than a half. That's larger than a half. The only one that's smaller than a half is 3/9. Half of 9 is 4.5. So if this number up here was 4.5, which we don't see something like that too often, but 4.5/9, that would be a half. This is 3/9. It's less than a half. And if we draw a line right here, we can see that this is 1, 2, 3 pieces, which is the same thing as 3/9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Number 5. This is almost the whole thing shaded. So which one of these fractions represents almost the whole thing? 5 out of 5, that is the whole thing. 1/2, it's definitely larger than a half. Can't be that. 7/8 is almost the whole thing. 1/2, or 1/4, that's almost none of it. Here's 1/4 right up here. And so 7/8 is the only one that makes sense. Number 6, 3/4, 3/8, 1/5, and 2/6. Again, we're looking at this saying, that's more than a half. I might go more over in here. but definitely more than a half. Which ones of these are less than a half? Well, all three of these are less than a half, so it can't be any of those. It's going to be 3/4. The next one is completely shaded in. The only fraction over here that shows everything shaded is 4/4. That means the whole thing. Number 8, this one is a little bit more than a half shaded, and we have this being hardly anything. That's definitely less than a half, and 3/10 is less than 5/10. 5/10 is a half. The only one that's a little bit more than a half, because 4/8 is a half, is 5/8. All right, here's some math facts that I want you to practice. Pause the video, do all of these as fast as you can. These are math facts. Let me show you how to... Whoa, the first couple are missing numbers up here on mine. Let me show you how to do this one right here. I do not want you to show your work down here. I just want you to do this in your head. You're going to go 5 into 47, goes 9 times. 9 times 5 is 45, so the answer is 9 remainder 2. All in your head, no show work. Okay, do all these as fast as you can without showing your work. Turn the video back on when you're ready to see the solutions to compare your answers. All right, here are all the answers. You can pause the video to check your work, and thanks for watching.